live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. As we often do, we'd like to tell everybody, first of all, welcome. Welcome to the Bond Book Club. This edition is Live and Let Die. Hold on a second. I've been practicing this all week. Hold on. It's going to be a beautiful day. I had to do that. I felt obligated. And we'll tell you why in a second. But first of all, I always like to check sound. This is so important that you not only see us, but that you can hear us. So as I always do, can somebody out there in the chat room tell me, are you hearing us? Are you hearing me? And before we do that, also let me know where you're dialing in from. We've got people from all around. We've got Sheffield, England. We've got Ireland. We've got Japan. We've got Norway. We've got all the way in Pennsylvania. My gosh. I assume everybody can hear me. I'm looking for that feedback so we know that there's sound going. Very clear. Wow. And somebody asked right away, where's Joe? Joe Darlington. He's out there somewhere. He's definitely out there. We've got people from Orlando, Florida. We've got people from all over. Welcome. All right. Let's get right into this. First of all, I always talk about the how and the what and the where and the who. We're going to put all that aside and talk about the why. Why are we here today? All right, so not too long ago, a gentleman named Jeremy Duns, who's sitting over there next to me, and AJ Chowdhury came up with an idea. And it was an idea to motivate all of us to do something, not just for body, not just for the cinema, but for our minds as well, to get back to reading. Remember that when we had time and when we were kids? And there was a challenge, and we love a good challenge. The hashtag Fleming Reading Challenge was born, and suddenly people of all ages, whether you've read the books or you've never experienced the books, picked up the books again. Smells like pulp. Love it. And by the way, some of you picked up a Kindle, and that was fine too. Some of you listened to the audiobook. It was about going back to the prose. And some of us have time and we need a distraction. And then we went one step further because we're all about the experience. And we said, imagine if you will, that we could do a virtual safe at home, like you all are, in your pajamas, and do a book club. A book club. A book club is when we talk about the different book that we read during the month, and we chat about it. We argue, maybe. We conflict, maybe. But we rejoice. We celebrate each other, and we celebrate the writing of Ian Fleming. Very often it's accompanied by libations. And today I've got something. I had to go, right? Jamaica. I had to do my Jamaica bit. Very cold, very Fleming, wouldn't you say? But one of the things that this is a part of is not me talking to you. It's really speaking with you. And I'm joined by three incredible panelists today that I am so excited about. They all bring something incredible to the table. First of all, I'd like to welcome back one of the founders of the hashtag Fleming Reading Challenge, Jeremy Duns. Welcome back, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. That's far too kind. I think I just said at some point that we should read Fleming, and you came up with this whole thing, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I think it's a great opportunity to really go back to the roots of James Bond and to see where it all began and to understand really where a lot of the stuff that we like about James Bond originated. So I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I'm delighted to be part of it.
Well, excellent. And not only do you speak the language of the books, you are an accomplished author yourself. You've also done quite a bit of historical perspective on Ian Fleming.
Yeah, I have. Over the years, I've found that it's easier to write about stuff that you like. So over the years, I have actually found that I've written a lot about James Bond and about Ian Fleming. And yeah, I've done quite a bit of research into various things. And in fact, AJ kind of got me onto that path because AJ set up a magazine a long time ago before Daniel Craig was cast, or around about that time. And he asked me if I could write an article about Ian Fleming. And that kind of set me off on this chain of what he calls James Bond journalism, or JBJ. And I always love it when he says, oh, more James Bond journalism. So yeah, I've done quite a lot of that over the years as well. Absolutely.
I love that you have an acronym built on this already.
That's AJ's.
Phenomenal.
That's AJ's thing. That's AJ's thing.
All right, more from Jeremy in a second. But I had to invite somebody that, is a fan like me, but Shawn and I have known each other for well over a decade. Shawn is a fitness guy. He is an adventurer. He loves to travel. He loves to live the Bond and Fleming life. Plus, he also lives in Miami, which is a location from this book. But Shawn Parker, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dave. It's nice to talk to you almost in real life for a change.
I know we've gotten so close, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, I'm not sure if you noticed about me. I'm actually a native Pennsylvanian. I've just never been home at the same time when you were home. I almost tried to bum rush you when you were getting your hair cut that day, but I missed my thing at the airport. I was going to just find you and show up there. But yeah, I'm from Philadelphia, but I've lived here in Miami for going on 20 years now.
You know something? I'm not going to hold that against you. I like people from Philly. You're okay in my book, man.
Okay.
No, but welcome to the show, Shawn. Thanks for being here. And we have a very recognizable face. We've been talking about this individual being on this show, the amount of excitement, and I've had an absolute pleasure over the last week and a half speaking to her off camera, which is just as fun. But ladies and gentlemen, Gloria Hendry, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you doing, David? My God, thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm doing amazing. I mean, I've got to, I'm probably going to make you blush a little bit in the sense that you are absolutely Bond royalty. I mean, we talk about some of the characters of the film, some of the indelible moments from our childhood all the way through. Rosie is definitely one of those individuals and such a, wonderfully complicated character. And for you to come on and be able to tell stories interweaving in this discussion is an absolute gem. So thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to opening up and having a good time.
Well, by the way, I should call that out. Rosie, listen to me. I'm in La La Land. Gloria and I, we made a promise to each other. We said today is going to be a party. It's going to be a celebration. This is not serious. If you want serious history, if you want a serious discussion, if you want us to trounce things, that's some other thing. This is about really celebrating the franchise and obviously the books. And by the way, I do want to call out a few people like Plastic Desert is saying, hey, Gloria, not perfected yet. Hey, Gloria. Bill Canis. Hey, Gloria. Everybody is so excited to see you. Horeb Door. We've got a few hundred people kind of waving to Gloria right now. So just a little bit excited about the panel. If you have questions or comments during this, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I am going to be constantly watching the live chat. So please, by all means, let us know what you want to ask. But we're going to kick this off. And Gloria, I'm actually going to kick it off with you. So we're going to talk about the book in the sense of, obviously, you were in the movie Live and Let Die. We always talk about our first experience with the book, with these book clubs. Did you have to read the book before you actually played the role?
Well, no.
Honest?
Honestly, it was really incredible. I mean, how I got the role. I mean, it's a story that I would like to say in short. No, I never read the book. I never saw a Bond film at that time in 1973. I was a Playboy bunny. Matter of fact, I was working at the Playboy Club and I took a sabbatical and I came to California to do features. But to make a long story short, no, I never read the book and I had not ever seen a Bond film.
Wow. Now, did you read the book afterwards with all the popularity? Were you curious?
Yes, I was. And yes, I did. I cracked it. But basically, I read Roger Moore's version of Live and Let Die, which is this.
Yes, his diary, of course.
He wrote about his daily journey being Bond for the first time. And I read that afterwards. But I had never read about Ian Fleming until much later. And I'll let you know about the reasons why later.
All right. Sounds good. Jeremy, your first experience with this book.
You know, I actually can't remember, but I think I tried when I was at school to read this when I was maybe 14 or 15, because the library at my school had several Ian Flemings, and I just couldn't get into it at all. It seemed completely another world for me. And then I didn't properly read it until I was in my 20s, and I read all of the Flemings in a row. And then I read it again a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So I think this is probably my third or fourth, I'm not quite sure, read. But I have to say that this was by far my most immersive read, actually. The fact that we're having this book club made me kind of think more and focus and consider a little bit more about what I made of the book. And I really enjoyed it and really kind of took it all in this time a lot more than I had done before. So I saw lots of stuff that I hadn't even remembered or hadn't realized. So yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Fantastic. And let me see. One of the things I wanted to connect on was Shawn. You know, your first experience, and then also coming back to it, as Jeremy said.
Yeah, the very first time I read the book, I might have been 9 or 10 years old, because I used to want to watch all these movies, but my mom was like, you can't watch that movie, read the book, which may have been a parental genius or mistake, because whatever I wanted to see, she said, you can't see it, but read the book. And generally, the books are more graphic than movies can be. So when I read the book at 9, obviously I couldn't comprehend everything in the book. But so coming back and rereading it, and after seeing the movie a few times, and now having traveled and been to most of the places that are in the book, I enjoyed it obviously a lot more.
Yeah, I can imagine. But you know, one of the things that Jeremy and I were talking about before we came live is that I've read it before. I think, Jeremy, like you, I read it in my teens. And I remember picking up the Fleming books. I'm going to be very transparent here. And maybe, Gloria, this is how you were too with them. And almost feeling like I was forcing myself to read it. Like I enjoyed the movies. And I'm like, oh, if I enjoy the movies, maybe I should really push myself into the books. And so I remember, dare I say, skimming them. This time around, when I read Live and Let Die, I think because I loved the Casino Royale book, knowing obviously we were going to talk to so many people, I really took my time and I loved it. I relished it. And we're going to be talking about some of the things we really like about the book in a moment. But it was something where, and I use this word to Jeremy, I relished. You know, I would read a couple chapters and then I found myself going too fast, you know, getting through the book too quickly. And I wanted to actually pull back the reins. And it's almost like when you're enjoying a really good meal or a good glass of wine and you're like, you know something, sip it, David. Don't gulp this. This is a good wine. It's a great meal. You're, you know, dying. Experience it. And I found that with Live and Let Die, literally, I just had a great time. To me, and now we're going to get into kind of the crux of things. To me, I found this a much more serious book than Casino Royale. From a story standpoint, I found it a little bit the tone. You know, I always said Casino Royale to me was almost like a character analysis of Bond. You know, and you know, the latter third of it was really about his reconciling with a relationship, which Fleming was doing in real life. But to me, the story here was pretty darn serious. It was an adventure story. And I think I just got into it that much more. But Jeremy, as an author, as someone that needs to work through the process of story and plot, what do you think of the story of Live and Let Die?
Well, I think you said lots of very interesting things there. And I think one of the things that you said about relishing, I think is something that's very new that Ian Fleming brought to the thriller. Because although it's true, this is much more plot driven and it's more of an adventure story, it is nevertheless a book that you can relish. There are lots of moments of downtime. Bond smokes, eats and drinks the whole way through this, and you savor those moments. And James Bond himself as a character savors the moments when he can, when he's not in danger. And this was quite new, because even when you had high living characters in thrillers before, like The Saint, for example, by Leslie Charteris, of which there are a lot of similarities between James Bond and the Saint, not just the fact that Roger Moore played both, but if you read the Saint books, the character is this high-living daredevil. He sometimes works for British intelligence. Women love him. And he's this kind of Robin Hood figure. And he's a fine dining guy. So there's a lot of similarities. However, they were much, much more cliffhangery. And generally speaking, thrillers moved at a much faster pace. So I think that's something that's very interesting. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of the plot. Casino Royale is much thinner than this. Not much happens in Casino Royale. I mean, quite a lot happens in a short space of time, but it's not a traditional plot. And in fact, it reads more like the last Bond novel than the first Bond novel, because Bond falls in love, considers marrying, considers resigning. His lover kills herself. You know, spoiler alerts. But I mean, there's a hell of a lot. That's what you would normally expect a whole series to lead up to. This book is really the beginning of the Bond series as we know it. It's what we think of as James Bond. It's the whole template of the novels and also of the films. There's a lot of stuff in here that set the stage for all of the stuff that we like. There's a mega villain who's on a yacht in Jamaica. You know, there's elaborate torture. In Casino Royale, Le Chiffre deliberately says, I'm not going to do any of that. You know, and here we have a very, I'm skipping ahead. But so I think it's a more traditional story. It's an adventure story. And I think it's an extremely accomplished second novel and a very, very exciting, hugely enjoyable story that has a few things that maybe we in hindsight might think of as flaws. But no, I think it's a terrific story and definitely an advance on Casino Royale in terms of plotting.
I agree. And by the way, the chat room is lit up. Thomas Ryan, for example, says, I'll never forget reading Live and Let Die for the first time. It was so exciting because the sense of danger was through the roof. And I think that's a great point of what you're saying. And, you know, Gloria, I've got to go to you for a moment because, you know, you're hired and we do want to hear, you know, definitely a bit of that story, of course. And in that, you know, you get obviously a script, you see the story. I'd love you to answer amidst that story of, you know, getting hired in the script, if you were aware that the movie was going to deviate from the book.
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, Tom Mankiewicz, when I hit the set, he said, I'm sorry. I said, well, thank you. I didn't know why he continued to say, I'm sorry. And Jane Seymour, when I met her, we both came on the set at about the same time. And to make a long story short, Bond was already filming. And you know, they cast prior to filming, after they located and everything. It takes them about 2 years or a good year before they even come up and start shooting and etc. It takes 2 to 3 years to even get the film out. So I was called at the last minute and I had to fly to Louisiana, to make a long story short. And from Louisiana, I hung out with them and of course, hung out on the set and went on to Jamaica with them. And when I arrived in Jamaica, they said, Gloria is coming home. I'm not a Jamaican. So they had to do this because this film basically is a British, you know, when by the time I get to Great Britain, I'm supposed to be a, you know, Jamaican. So I would have a passport that would allow me to come to Jamaica and work. I would have permission as a Jamaican. So when I arrived in Jamaica, Gloria comes home. That was the setup. So by the time I got to London, to Pinewood Studios, it would be perfectly all right for me to fly in and work. Make a long story short. So to back up, to say no, but I had read that script about 50 times to me. I continued to read the script because the role was so compact. There's a lot of the character had to be in there. And besides being Rosie Carver, the detective, but besides being like so ditzy, I was trying to find some substance for her.
Good for you.
Really trying to find some kind of substance for her to give her some kind of, other than, you know, being ditzy and not knowing what the hell she's doing. So that was my job. So by the time I got to Jamaica to shoot the film, I was serious. And as you read Roger Moore's book, he said, I gave it up soulfully, spiritually. He says she really got in there and made this role work. Yeah, I really had to because it was so compact and I had to fill up that screen, fill up the spirit of this young lady.
Well, and you did. And what's interesting is, and not a lot of people do a breakdown of the role, but she's obviously, a double agent. She's supposed to be one of the allies and obviously turns things around, but she's also afraid for her very life. So you do have to, I don't know what it said on the script, but you did add some layers to it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And also I tried to add a little British in there.
Oh.
That is the way it's written. It lent the dialogue, or the lyrics, however you want to speak of it, it lent itself toward a more of a British accent. So when I delivered it, I had a little, and plus I was around nothing but Brits for a minute, being with Roger. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, but I never really auditioned for it either.
Oh, no kidding. Oh my gosh.
No kidding. They flew me in from California. That is, my manager. I left New York City and I went to California, just to search around for work. And I got a phone call from my manager who said they wanted to see you from Bond film. I said, what? Yes, they would like you. They like to consider you for Bond. You have an audition. I said, where? He said, New York. I said, you're kidding me. I'm in California and I'm getting ready to do XYZ film. And he said, well, you have to get back here. So I had to fly back to New York on my own dime. And I said, there's no way I'm going to get this role. I'm not blonde. I'm not blue-eyed. I don't have a 38 bus line. So when I flew in, I had to see Harry Saltzman. And when I walked in the door, this wonderfully mature, handsome man stands up and says, madam, how was your trip? And I still had my New York apartment. So he said, how was your trip? And I said, fine. He said, how soon can you prepare to go to New Orleans? I said, anytime. So he said, we'll pick you up in an hour. So I had to go back to my apartment on Park West Village. And they picked me up in a limousine and put me in first class. First time I've ever flown first class. First class flight to, of course, Louisiana. They picked me up in a limousine there and took me to the set in the French Quarter. And I met Roger. I said, oh my God, this is the saint. I met Roger and I met Guy Hamilton. And we sat down and we had lunch, basically, and talked. And then he said, well, madam, would you like to stay around and to come to the set? He said, and you could stay overnight. And I said, no, thank you. And so, well, okay, we were still looking. And so I left and I went back to New York. And then I took the first plane I could get back to California. And so 2 weeks later, they told me I got the role, just like that.
Oh
I had no passport. I had to run around to get my shots, my gamma gluten shot. I mean, all kinds of shots just to go to Jamaica. And it was like, wow, it was incredible from that point on. It was just incredible. I was with the film for 3 months, just about 2.5 to 3 months.
I tell you, this story is sparking a lot of great conversation. We've got a great question in here that, Shawn, I'm going to ask you to do this. It's a tough question, so it's not easy. So prepare yourself, but it kind of flanks off of what Gloria just said. By the way, Gloria, everybody says they have a crush on you in the chat room. So I don't know whether to apologize or to applaud you. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a nice thing, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a mutual admiration club. All right. That's what we're talking about here. Shawn, do you think thinking of the novel as a whole, do you think when you think about the different allies, the friends of Bond, even, some of the cutthroats of Bond in this book, do you think it would have been a better book if you had added Rosie Carver as a character?
Oh, I don't want to talk about that.
What do you think, Shawn?
I don't
Same
know.
here.
Let me think about how far away are you from me, bro? No, I think the book would have been, I don't know if it would be say better for it, but it wouldn't have taken away for it, because one of the great things about this book is even the people who are technically the bad guys are, some of them, the henchmen, are probably the lower level people, are not so much bad people as much as they're afraid of Mr. Biggs.
Ooh.
Even the people who won't help Bond are very polite about it. One guy goes, hey man, I got a wife and kids. He's nice and polite about it, but he's afraid. The people who don't take action to help Bond towards his goal, most of them are afraid. So if you were to add it, a character like Rosie in there who was double agent or duplicitous, it would have added to the plot. It wouldn't have made the book worse for it, because sometimes just adding a character will make something jump the shark. It's like, oh no, here comes the baby, or whatever people do to make a book, or the character is there only to do exposition to explain to the people who can't figure it out. So I think the addition of that character would have helped the book.
That's an
It
interesting.
wouldn't have taken away from it more than anything else. You could have taken away a couple of meathead people and put her in there, and it made it more complicated.
Jeremy, you were going to say something.
I think Gloria was going to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Right. I would like to add to that. So, again, I didn't have to read anything or nothing at the audition. To make a long story short, and I mentioned Tom Mankiewicz apologized to me during the filming of Live and Let Die. They did not want to kill me, and they said, "Madam, please hold," and they wanted to not kill me. So they went and had a discussion how to fit me in the film throughout, because they liked me so much. He said, because we like you so much, we don't want to kill you. We're trying to figure out how to keep you. And it wound up, they had to send me off to London and to finish the scene out. But to really back up again, Rosie Carver was, as you said, put in the film, and I don't know how they did it. They did it obviously in the feature, but not in the book. And also, Solitaire was supposed to have been Jamaican. So a woman of my hue was supposed to be Solitaire. And my role was supposed to be, I believe, Caucasian.
Okay.
So whoever was doing originally the part of Solitaire left. Something went down. And it was a woman of color, and I don't know which one it was, but so there's a word out there, and I think our streamers know. And I think if we leave it to them, they'll tell you. I have an idea, but I never really could pinpoint it. So I don't want to say. But I think somebody out there is going to say who it was. That was.
I think I know who it was.
Who was it?
Diana Ross.
That's right. That was the word that I got.
Where's my booty phrase?
10 points.
And obviously she said, I'm not going to let my role and go to the next role. So she left. That's how come it was switched out. At the last minute they were filming. That's the only reason why I could see why Jane Seymour and I came in at the last moment. Jane took over the role and I took on Solitaire. So they kept a woman of color in the piece.
Interesting.
And it was shot in Jamaica, and the villains were all my hue.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, the way both you and Shawn were kind of discussing this. The henchmen, or, you know, as I like to say, kind of the baddies, you know, not the core ones, but, you know, even Rosie in the movie, you know, has that turn where she can be seen as a little villainous. But the henchman in this film, for example, the robber, I agree with you, Shawn. I think the robber is a wonderfully written character. Obviously a quote unquote bad guy, the way he's painted, but isn't he just doing his job? Isn't he protecting a warehouse using the skills that he does? And I've got to tell you, because you look at, you know, the James Bond of today, especially with the movies, and he is a bit of a superhero. In that scene in the warehouse by the robber and some of the other henchmen, Bond gets his butt kicked. I mean, Jeremy, you know, when you flesh out some of these henchmen, as Shawn was saying, I mean, what's some of your takeaways?
I mean, I think those are very interesting points. And I think Shawn made a great point, which ties in really to what Gloria was saying, which is these henchmen are in fear. Rosie Carver is also living in fear of Mr. Big. So she's not motivated by bad thoughts, or she's not a bad person, but she's been forced into this position. And I think that makes stuff more interesting. I think it does make it more interesting from a human level, that it's quite unusual actually. Normally in a Bond film, the cliche is, there's a kind of villainous base, and Bond kills lots of people in uniforms, and they're completely, this has been parodied. They're completely meaningless people, and this has been parodied by The Simpsons and stuff. Like, what about their wife and kids and all this stuff? And you kind of see that side actually in the book, and you see it in the film actually with Rosie Carver. You feel for her. And in the book, I mean, there's a wonderful, I've forgotten the name of the henchman, but Felix Leiter bonds over jazz with one of the henchmen, who basically kind of does the least he can do, And so this is meant to be the kind of the big Mr. Big's machine, the big man's machine, and this, whole thing that Bond, is thinking about, that he's got this kind of like network across the country. But in reality, as Shawn said, when you see like what it actually they're about, really you don't feel that way. I think with the robber, the way that he gets around the thing, Fleming, that you're talking about, that he's just protecting a warehouse, is he makes him pretty mean. So the scene with the rifle where he shoots the pelican, that's just unforced cruelty to an animal. So then we go, okay, but this guy's actually bad. He's not just protecting a warehouse, he's a bad guy. But with some of the others, you kind of don't have that. And I think also what you said about Bond getting his butt kicked, this is an interesting thing in this book. James Bond at several times has fear himself in this book. He's afraid. And this we don't really have now in the films. We certainly don't have it in Roger Moore's James Bond. And I think it's fascinating hearing, Gloria, your backstory to how you got the part. But I was particularly struck when you said that when you first met Roger Moore, you said, wow, this is the Saint. Because of course to us, James Bond, Roger Moore's James Bond, to most Bond fans, but of course this was his first film. And so to you, he had not been James Bond yet. So all of that history had not yet happened. So for you, Roger Moore was totally synonymous with the Saint, as he was for millions of people around the world. And to supersede that by playing another character who is quite a similar character, but in most people's minds, Roger Moore has become James Bond. And I think that's very interesting that you were there kind of at the crux of something completely new, a very dangerous time in a way for the Bond films, because this could have gone really wrong, replacing him. And I understand that Roger Moore, he wasn't allowed to raise his eyebrow when he was in the film because that would be too synonymous with the Saint. So I think that's very interesting. But I think also the Fleming and the film have something in common, which is that they wanted to show Jamaica. They wanted to show this other kind of culture, but it's not their culture. It's not Ian Fleming's culture. Ian Fleming had a house in Jamaica, but Ian Fleming was a white British man. And it's the same. The people who were making the Bond films were British and American, and they were mainly white. So how do you do that respectfully? And this was the difficult thing. I'm not sure either of them always succeeded, but some of these decisions about the henchmen and all these kind of things, I think were about trying to say, we're not going to make all of these people baddies. Not all the people who are black are baddies. So that kind of makes these kind of decisions, plot decisions and story decisions change.
Yeah. And Gloria, Bill Canis, who's in the chat room, had a really great observation about this entire discussion so far. It's the fact that Rosie, as a character, very well could have been a composite of the various characters who fear Mr. Big in the book. And you were literally the epitome of all of that fear, because, one of the things people know about Ian Fleming's writing of this book is this was supposed to be an exploration of evil, truly evil, and compositing that together. So many of them are calling out that Rosie could be a manifestation of that.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting.
You didn't think it was going to get this deep, did you?
Well, first of all, on one hand, I was surprised when they had the Voodoo with the blood, with the top hat and the feathers and the blood. And in Jamaica, there is I don't want to call it superstitions, because that's a person looking from the outside in. But they have their beliefs. Some people call it voodoo, and that means a negative term. And I'm not going there. But what I'm saying is that there's a history of spiritual evil and symbols. And so I did go and do my homework. I went to particular stores about spiritual, and when you see this symbol, or if you see this or this number, or you hear this word, this what this means. And so when I saw the top hat with the feathers and the blood, they literally took some part of a fable and put that together, which really registered when I saw that top hat. So the reason that depth came in, and definitely did, it came from a real space of understanding the spirits, that's evil things are beginning to happen. So by the time I got to the lake, I had already, like when I saw the what do you call it, scarecrow, and eyes, it was like, oh my God, this is it. And she knew she was going to die before it even happened.
Wow.
All of that, some people like to make it easy for you when you say voodoo, that if you think of anything symbolic, to take you to that space when you see, like if you say a particular number, 7, that's a good number. Automatically it makes you feel good. But when you see a 666, where does that take you?
No bueno.
So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and so I have a follow-up question, because I mean, I love, first of all, I knew this. I mean, Gloria and I have spoken before. The storytelling aspect, huge, love it. So that direction, you had it in your mind that you were going to react because you knew the fear that voodoo would invoke in her. So that was it less about the director saying, all right, Gloria, I want you to scream and open your eyes wide and freak out. That came from you.
That came from me. No. And he liked it. No, that came from me. That was all me.
We're never going to watch that scene the same way again, honestly.
And also there's another scene to make it lighter, when I was on top of Roger, kissing him on the lakeside.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and they had a closed set, just to brighten this up, but they had a closed set. First of all, if Louisa was there, his wife, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have been able to do the scene. That's definite. So it was, she couldn't be on the set. So when I leaned over Roger, I blew my breath in his face, and he went, "You're lucky my wife eats garlic, and she's Italian." Because the night before I planned it, I ate a bunch of garlic. And I blew my breath in his face, and he was like, "Oh, you." So that scene, the looks on our faces, we were having a good time.
maybe that's why he drew the gun. And by the way, as potentially wrong as it is, that is one of my favorite lines of the movie, when you kind of, cuddle up to him and you say, "Well, surely you wouldn't kill me, after what we've done." And he goes, "Well, I certainly wouldn't have done it before." Love that.
I had blown garlic in his face. It was just wonderful. I planned it. I said, I'm going to fix him. Roger's a joker. Roger's a wonderful joker.
Oh. That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
So we had so much fun. I mean, we had so much fun on the set.
Well, we're going to hear more about that. Shawn, I've got a question for you, because Jeremy before brought up Jamaica, and he's right. I mean, my gosh, the book highlights it. There's such a locational focus, whether it's the film, but certainly in this book. It was interesting because if you look at Casino Royale, it was really about Britain and the Soviet Union, but this is about Britain coming to the rescue of the United States against the Soviet Union. But they really only travel to the United States and Jamaica, and obviously England. But you live in Miami, so talk to me about when you got to the part of the book that focuses on Miami. Did you recognize it? Were you excited? What was that emotion?
Well, obviously, when the time when the book takes place, in my mind, I had to do two things while I was reading the book. One was try not to compare it to the movie, which I've seen a bunch of times. And the movie happens in the 70s, but the book happens before that. So the time in Miami where they're in the 50s, you know, it's 60, it predates me being born, let alone me being here. But because I know some of the history of Miami from talking to people, I'm like, oh, I can imagine where they're talking about now, that used to be what's now Little Havana, or where they're talking about now is where Bayside is. I mean, David, I know you know these places because you've been here,
Yeah.
but they look completely different. They had a different feel then, and then Miami was at that point just a different town. It was, you know, it was pre-Golden Girls moving here. It was pre-Scarface. It was pre all the things. But the way he describes the immutable things that don't move were very accurate, because I was like, oh, I know where that is. It just looks different now, but I know where that is.
And Shawn, I got to tell you, I was laughing like crazy because as a child, my father, ready for this, we would drive for 2 days down from New York, where I lived in upstate New York. This was our definition of vacation. Driving was part of the vacation. We would drive down and we would stay in St. Petersburg.
Wow.
And literally when he was describing St. Petersburg as, you know, these people who are just waiting to die lined up, that's what I remember as a young child. You know, I would go to eat smoked mullet and watch old people in St. Petersburg. I dare say it's probably changed now.
Not much.
Oh, we just lost our St. Petersburg viewership. Boom.
I mean, they're still the oldest settlement in the United States, and they still traipse on it. It's a beautiful place to relax.
Yeah. By the way, a couple people in the chat room calling out a very obvious thing. Thomas Ryan, first of all, I agree. I think it's great to see so many fans loving the voodoo elements of what's going on. It's an exciting book. A part of what I think made this exciting for me is the portrayal of Bond in this. Bond is, again, he's kind of that I'm getting beaten up, but I'm surviving, and you know, by you know the hair of my head getting through things. But he also really does get into a pickle. I love the way Bond was written in this as well. Jeremy, the portrayal of Bond as a character in this, even versus Casino Royale, what do you think was the difference, and also what did you like about that?
I mean, it's a lot less intense than Casino Royale. Casino, and it's almost like this is a reboot already, because in Casino Royale, I mean, first of all, the physical description of Solitaire is exceptionally similar to the physical description of Vesper. So if you compare how the two characters, and Bond doesn't blink, and you know, it's not so long ago. So he has this kind of scar from Casino Royale that is wiped away, you know, by plastic surgery. And pretty much the events of Casino Royale are as well. There are a few references to it, and he wants to go after Smersh and stuff. But considering what happened, he was brutally tortured. You know, the love of his life, supposedly, who he wanted to marry, kills herself. You know, he's recovered pretty quickly. And so we move on to a whole new thing. And he's not the dark. I mean, the end of Casino Royale is incredibly brutal, grim, and dark. It's a tragic, dark ending. This does not continue in Live and Let Die. We don't suddenly have that same. He hasn't been scarred in that way. The scar's literally been taken away. This again is much closer to the James Bond, the films that we know. There's more wry humor in this. There's the bit where Mr. Big says, you know, you'll be, to him in Solitaire near the end of the book, he says, you'll be dead in 3 hours, give or take a few minutes. And Bond replies and says, well, let's take those minutes because I value my life. There's quite a few little lines like that. They're not quite the same kind of punning Roger Moore kind of things, but there's a little bit of that. And I think what's interesting is it's pretty understated, his character. And Fleming himself said that he had intended Bond to be a blunt instrument, and Kingsley Amis called the character a silhouette. And a lot of people have written about Bond as if there isn't really a character there. But what I found interesting rereading this book is that even though it's not kind of really put down that much, and certainly not nearly as much as Casino Royale, the character Bond really comes through. And you really get this thing of he's kind of fussy. You know, he really savors his food and his drink in this. So the whole beginning to all of this kind of stuff, you're really seeing, you know, there's a scene where I can't remember, something serious has happened, and he's been captured in Harlem by Mr. Big. And when he gets back, the first thing he does is he has a whiskey, and he takes this time, to sit down, recover, and he's always interested in the finer things of life.
Jeremy,
have you found this bit?
He put a handful of wilted ice cubes into a tall glass, poured in 3 inches of Hague and Hague, and swilled the mixture round in the glass to cool and dilute it. Then he drank down half the glass in one long swallow. He put the glass down and eased himself out of his coat.
Yeah,
I mean,
and this is,
you could picture that.
And this is straight after he's escaped from the clutches of Mr. Big. Now, a lot of thriller writers wouldn't have done this. The character would immediately have been trying to solve the thing. But Fleming's instinct is to do this. And even though this is describing something that Bond is doing, it's not describing something Bond's saying or thinking, just something Bond is doing. It's showing character in a really interesting way. First of all, the fact that it's a Hague and Hague whiskey. He's a fussy guy, but also that he's taking the time to do this. And that's what's important to him. And I think that really comes across in this book. It comes across in Casino Royale as well. He spends a lot of time on this stuff. But I think Fleming's developed it here. And it's really Fleming's character. He's put this kind of fast adventure story, an action story that's based on a lot of British thrillers that have gone before. But he's got the guy at the center has his tastes and his kind of character. And it really comes through very, very strongly. And I think is one of the main strengths of the book.
I love that you used this word. I'm going to use it to broach a conversation, and that's fussiness. Because we love the fussiness of Bond, whether it's the movie one or obviously the literary one. This is, I think, even more than Casino Royale, one of the things I loved about it was the fussiness of Bond. In fact, there are some great excerpts. We talk about the lifestyle, for example. He acquired, when he was trying to look American, that whole fussiness of talking about a swing tie clip in the shape of a whip, an alligator skin billfold from Mark Cross, a plain Zippo lighter, a plastic travel pack containing razor hairbrush, a Sky-made Hartman luggage, a sack suit. This is not a British suit that fits like a second skin. And it's so un-Bond. And Gloria, I'm going to go to you right now, because when we saw Roger in Live and Let Die, one of the things that we see in the very beginning when we're introduced to Roger is him wearing this amazing robe, and he makes a cup of coffee for M that is from this contraption that takes half his kitchen up. He's a fussy Bond. He loves the finer things in life. He likes his drinks and his clothing, and he picks out ties that are just the right tie. Did you realize that his Bond was going to be the type of portrayal it was? And what did you think of his portrayal as Bond?
Wow. First of all, I have to get back to his humor, because while I'm supposed to be in the room, and he said, well, he went to the desk and they said, Mrs. Bond is here. Mrs. Bond. Mrs. Bond. And so as he approached the room, of course, well, this hand comes in, right? Well, first of all, he approaches the room and looks around, right? And so when he's savoring whatever, but when this hand comes in, because he can't find me. So when his hand comes in the door, he sees this hand. Now, first of all, if you really look at this hand, did you ever really look at this hand? It's a man's hand. It's supposed to be my hand. This is a man's hand colored with my complexion.
Oh my gosh, you're joking.
I have to, so we rerun that. If you slow it up, you could see it.
Why did they do that?
First of all, they claimed they couldn't find a woman of my hue to do the stunts in those days.
But a stunt? I mean, it's not a stunt to put your hand around a door.
No.
It is now.
See, you go into a somersault after that, remember?
Oh, yeah.
You go into a somersault. I could have done the somersault, but he pulls you, in other words, he pulls me in, right? Supposedly he pulls me and I do a somersault and my wig comes off. But this is a man's hand. Now, think about that. Would Bond put a burn on a woman's hand with a cigar? Think about that.
Yeah.
And then it's me. That's a thought. And then it winds up being a woman. That's very interesting.
Although
take a look at that.
I'll tell you, one thing I will say to people about Roger Moore, I think Roger First of all, a lot of people in the chat room saying that they miss Roger. I think we all do.
I
Gloria, I'm
do
sure you
too,
do as well.
absolutely.
I know
Oh
you were
my God,
friends. Absolutely. But one of the
absolutely.
things I will defend Roger when they say that his movies were somewhat campy. I think he could play very dark.
Oh,
And
he
I
can.
think, right, very serious. I think For Your Eyes
Very serious.
Only. And I think Live and Let Die, he's got some dark moments. So,
Oh,
I
he
mean,
does.
right? He's like
Yes, it
no,
does.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And to say that, that all depends on who's looking and what they are looking for. Because Bond is, if you took it really seriously, come on, it'd be an awful movie if you played it dark because he's always being challenged. I mean, he's being challenged all the time. And if Bond did do that, and also if Rosie really continued to become so heavy herself, she'll be a bore. She had to go, well, and then go back down. Oh, well, I could have killed you, that little, and then she goes back. First, she's serious, and oh, well, I could have killed you. Then she's got to go back. No, but I think right there is to question what happened when his hand comes in the door. I think that was a quick decision. That was for him to take a cigar and put it on a woman's hand. He would not have done that. He wouldn't have done that if it was really a woman's hand.
Well,
So
it's interesting.
that's a little glitz there.
I love that you're saying this because the chat room,
That's
no shock, is 100% behind you. In fact, there's a
he
gentleman,
wouldn't have done it. He
there's a
wouldn't have.
gentleman who calls himself Being James Bond, who says a man's hand looks more sinister, and maybe that's why they did it.
Well, see, the somersault wasn't me.
Okay.
Was it a woman at least?
No, it wasn't. It was a man.
Okay.
A small man that did the somersault. But the hand situation, they wanted, I don't know, it did look more sinister, true. But I think that, that's up to the audience and everybody to think about. But I knew what happened. So I'm giving you the inside dope.
Gloria, I was going to say, nobody on this discussion today is going to watch the movie the same way.
I'm
be
giving the
studying it.
inside dope. That's what I'm here for, right? So I'm giving the inside dope. So
I
as
love
I do the somersault, my wig falls off. This is not supposed to happen.
My gosh.
This is a mistake. And I
Okay.
continued with the scene. I didn't stop and say, "Oh, my wig came off." I didn't do that. I continued with the scene.
I
Okay.
love that.
And
I
we
love that.
played it. And
By the
then
way-
when he hugged me,
Yeah.
and I said, "Oh, please, please." And he hugged me. He said, "I'll lick you into shape." Oh, we both wanted to fall out laughing. I mean, when he said that line, I just wanted to just burst out laughing. I had to hold it.
Now, was he as charming? I mean, a couple people asking, was he as charming when the cameras stopped rolling as he seemed to be on screen?
He was so relaxed on screen, it was ridiculous. It was him and him off the screen. I mean, when he said, "I'll lick you into shape," I'm like, oh. And we both like, trying to go on, and we did. But feeling was still there, if you know what I mean. So if there's action in the actor reacting, it's all good. So we kept going. He said, "That's a take."
That's hysterical.
Yes.
Shawn, you live many of the aspects of your life in kind of the pattern of Bond, and we call this Bond lifestyle. There's a great discussion in here. You could tell I did like little earmark stuff, even when Bond decides not to do gin because he thinks that gin is not as purified, that he goes to vodka. As you were reading this book and you're looking at kind of the lifestyle moments, I mean, what did you think about that? I mean, were there any that really kind of stood out to you and got you excited?
Well, yeah, we've already talked about how fussy he was, and rereading this book in particular, I never think about myself as being a fussy person, but now when I look through the eyes of trying to be James Bond, I realize how many things I'm really particular about now. And when people make fun of me, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's kind of true. But you know what? That's what makes you you. And one of the things, really, like his disdain for having to wear the American clothes was, I just laughed my ass off while I was reading that. And then he went ahead and he snuck his own pair of shoes and started wearing his own shoes. He packed them separately so he could wear his own shoes. And and as much as he's, you know, in the movies portrayed sometimes as a hard, heartless killer or dismissive or anything, one of the things I really liked that made him very human, approachable, just like us, and then still fussy, when he's finishing the dossier, this talking about the whole Voodoo sequence and how gory and graphic it is, he's shaken and upset by reading that. He's not like dismissing it as like, oh, this is just some whatever. He's shaking. And then there's a knock at the door, and then there's breakfast, and he has to take a moment to pause before he can enjoy his breakfast. And that's a very relatable thing that we can all do. But once he starts to enjoy his breakfast, because he's like, okay, it's made the way I like it. And then kind of dovetailing off of that, one of the things I liked about this book is, you know, most of the time when you think of James Bond from the movies and he's enjoying these meals, they're in Paris someplace or some fine restaurant. In the book, he enjoys the meal that he has in the soul food joint in Harlem just as much. He savors, he talks about how great the fried chicken is, he talks about how great the drink was made, all those things. And that's, I know, it reminds me that I want to be present in every situation that I am and enjoy it for what it is, even if no one else, you know, sees it or enjoys it, because we live in this Instagram world, we have to post everything we're doing. He enjoys it just for the pleasure of just doing it.
I love that, because Fleming does such a wonderful job. This is why I'm relishing these books. He really shows Bond that Bond knows he's an assassin and a spy and could wake up the next morning dead. You know, he even talks about the fact that, you know, condemned man made a hearty breakfast. He reflected pineapple juice, cornflakes, cream, shirred eggs with bacon, double portion of cafe espresso, toast and marmalade. I mean, he relishes these moments. I'll overuse that word again, because he knows that could be his last moment. But you make a great point. He also takes in his environment. If he's in Jamaica, he drinks a Jamaican beer. If he's, you know, in New York City, he's going to, you know, have a special soup, you know, or he's going to have, you know, a particular beer for the environment. And it's something that I think we can all learn. Jeremy, I've got to ask you a Fleming question, because you're a bit of a Fleming historian here.
Okay.
When I read this and I read some of the articles written about the Fleming books in general, there is often a discussion around this. There are excerpts that Fleming will put in here, and they're really Fleming's opinion. Like, for example, even the things about Americans, even things about clothing, and the disdain, as Shawn so aptly put it. Do you think that was Bond the character, or was it Fleming's soft way of filtering a good old-fashioned opinion on his part?
Well, I mean, as I said before, I think what he's done is he has created a character who is two things at once. So on the one hand, it's a very anonymous character, and he's trying to present a modern, you know, for that time, 1954, mid-50s, a sort of new type of thing in the thriller, which is, this is what actual British intelligence agents do. This is how they work. This is what it would be like. And Fleming knew from his own life people who were in this line of work, and he had done intelligence work during the war. So it's like there were real 004s and 006s and 007s, and he knew this type of man. So he said in an interview that they're based on kind of a lot of special forces people he'd known during the war and that kind of stuff. And these people lived a certain way. And so he's put that into an adventure story, but then he's grafted on to the character of Bond, of this guy. On the one hand, he seems very anonymous, but on the other hand, all of his opinions, or most of his opinions, most of his tastes are Ian Fleming's. So that's where you get this thing. And so you've got some parts of it where it really feels quite dangerous and quite realistic. And then you've got these other parts where it's like a travelogue, where it's like a guidebook, you know, to Miami or Jamaica, or wherever it is. But that's what really makes it work. That's what's so fascinating about it. I mean, Ian Fleming wrote this article fairly late on in his career called How to Write a Thriller. And there's something he said in that which I thought was fascinating, where he said that he loves the poetry of things. And I think this applies to him and Bond. So when you were reading a bit earlier about, the clothes. He often talks about, his plane lighter, and he's talking about, he notices things, so he's talking about the details of clothes, and he's not always favorable. This isn't a kind of guidebook where he's just going to say, Shawn mentioned he really likes a meal that he has in Harlem, but there's another meal he has I think it's in the Everglades, which he hates, or it's in a little diner somewhere. And when he doesn't like something, he says he hates it, and he's very disdainful, as you say. But it's a very clever effect. I think it's a genuine thing that Fleming put his own opinions in. Bond's opinionated with Fleming's opinions. But I think it's very clever because you trust him more. Because, if you read a guidebook or something and it just says everything's fantastic, everything's wonderful, always everything's wonderful, after a while it wears off. It doesn't have an effect. Whereas if someone says, this place is terrible and goes into detail why, but this place is amazing and fantastic, then you have more, it's got more authority. And what you get, I think, from this book is the feeling of authority, of a connoisseur, of someone who has expertise in lots of different things. When he describes a yacht or a plane or anything, he's describing the machinery of these things with great detail and precision. And you believe this guy knows what he's talking about. And so because he feels like he knows what he's talking about lots of different things, the more he talks about food and drink and clothes, the more you trust this guy. So that, I think, is where the character of Bond coincides both with Fleming and with really the appeal of, what we all know from the James Bond films, of this kind of high living kind of thing. So I think that's what he created, which really was kind of new to the world in 1955. And you can still see, it's very, very interesting talking to Gloria, because you really, that film was made in 1973, we're quite a long way afterwards. But nevertheless, even though they totally changed the plot, Rosie Carver wasn't in there, you can see all the DNA is in this book. And interestingly, in the film, the voodoo stuff, all of the stuff with Baron Samedi and all of those scenes, which terrified me as a kid, especially that ending shot on Baron Samedi, of course, that should be in the film of Live and Let Die, but none of it is actually in the book. There is no voodoo ceremony in the book. Shawn mentions he reads about it in The Traveler's Tree, but you would expect in the novel Live and Let Die that Bond witnesses a voodoo ceremony. He doesn't. It's not there. We don't have that. So it's interesting that some stuff that they missed out, but there's some stuff that you kind of think, well, that should have been in the book. So I think that's interesting too.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that aspect, because there's a couple of interesting things where this book in particular, has fed at least 4 of the movies that we know and love. One of the things I will tell you is that, back to the travelogue aspect, I find that Ian Fleming, more than I remember, is a very immersive writer, in that I only found out after reading this that he and his wife had actually taken that train that he writes about, he himself, and had seen and witnessed those things. And I think the best writers, I'm sure like yourself, they write about their experiences and then they like tweak it 14%. But it's the top of the hour, and we're continuing on hard, and the room is lit up, and I want to broach a subject, and I don't want to stray away from it. Too easy to stray away from it. I want to start off, and someone actually kicked it off in the chat room. But I'd like to read a question for Gloria from Fletcher Sykes. Fletcher says, "Hi, Gloria. What was your experience like being recognized as the first Black woman to be romantically involved with James Bond?"
Wow, that's that question. To be very honest with you, I didn't think about it initially. It didn't cross my mind at that time and initially, because I'm an actress, first of all. Mm-hmm. And as an artist, your world is, your world is larger than it was initially, personally, from where I came from. So to make a long story short, by being accepted to do Live and Let Die, I was shocked that I was selected. That's first of all. Because then initially I said I wasn't blonde, I wasn't blue-eyed, I didn't have a big breast, and I wasn't tall. And I got the part. So all of that to say, as an artist, I was shocked. But being on the set with Harry Saltzman and Roger Moore, the crew, never came across my mind in the art of working, in the
Excellent.
artistry world of working. It never even affected me. I was treated like I was I was starring with Roger Moore. And I was there for 3 months. Everything was first class. And I had my chair. They ran around with my chair everywhere I went with my name on it. Miss Hendry, please sit down. My costumes were, I didn't think about it only until after the fact. After the fact, when the film came out, that's when it all hit. And Roger and I didn't, I mean, we never spoke on it, but until after, and it was like, that's interesting. So yes, after the fact, yes, I got a lot of flack from it. In Africa, the screens were blackened in our scene, our love scene. In various parts of the country of the United States, they blackened out that scene in various parts of the country. And my name was no longer associated with the feature in certain theaters. They didn't even have my name up, or publicity wise. And in the artistry, in the art world, some people didn't think much of the Bond at that time because Bond wasn't big. That was the 8th film, okay? Today is the what? The 20th something film now. This is the longest running series ever.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to be a part of it. But each as history, moves through, you never know what stands and what doesn't, and what you go through during that period of time. What we're going through, like with COVID right now.
Yeah.
So yes, I got flack. I got a lot of flack. I did.
It's interesting. I'll tell you that I think people's views of things, their perceptions, their filter is kind of what they bring to the table. And it's unfortunate that you received that flack, of course. And I also actually think your role, I think all the roles in Live and Let Die are actually very strong roles. I do some reviews of the films, and I actually said that, the Mr. Big character in the movie Live and Let Die, and by the way, I'll say even in the book, is probably one of the strongest James Bond characters. I mean, he's an equal of Bond in the movie. And he is, Michael Poplawski, one of the chat room people right now, says, really, Mr. Big's organization is puppeting Bond up until the very end. And it's almost like a little glitch, around a limpet mine, quite frankly, that undoes him, or else Bond would have been done for. Same with your film that you were in. I mean, really, the quote unquote villains were Bond's equal in every way. And I will say that the Sheriff Pepper character, to me, I thought it was the producer's way of almost, saying that racism, abject racism is not right. Look at this buffoon who is such a, Sheriff Pepper. But yeah, I mean, it depends on kind of what you bring to the table, to your point.
Well, I just want to say something about that, what you just said in that same reality. Harry Saltzman said to me, the top producer, he produced Live and Let Die. He said, everybody should marry another culture so we won't have prejudice. And I looked at him and I said, we all are. I'm a combination of Native American, African, Irish, and etc. and whatever else. And what you see is not what you get. That's what is the problem. Most of us are mixed. I have people that look like you in my family, so most of us are. And this color thing is going to fade out because it doesn't mean anything. We're human beings first. And we look different, and we all have blood and oxygen and all. We need the same thing. So in one of these days, we're going to get smart and stop killing ourselves, because you check your DNA out, you might find a whole lot of folks in your DNA.
I couldn't have said it better. It's beautifully said. And by the way, very passionate chat room discussion. I'm going to share one. John Riggs says, David, please, please tell Gloria how much we all appreciate what she brought to that role. It's not an easy character play, and she did it beautifully.
Thank you
Very
so
nicely
much.
said.
Thank you so much.
Very nice. Shawn, I've got to ask you, I mean, you know, as you're reading this, gosh, we've been friends for like close to 12 years. But, you know, as you're reading the book, you know, there has been discussion of some uncomfortable moments. Do you see it as it's written in a point of time, like you were talking about the locations, or, you know, what was your reaction, if you don't mind talking about that?
Yeah, when I read the book, it kind of reminds me, rereading the book, it reminds me of the movie Tropic Thunder. Like, you couldn't make Tropic Thunder now. You just couldn't do it.
No.
And right now, the way that that book was written, the language would not be acceptable or palatable to most people now. But in this case, it was really just the words, not any opinion given by anything. In fact, when I reread the book, one of the things that really struck me in the very first chapter was actually M's description of Mr. Big's organization. It was very descriptive and complimentary. Like, he respected the way that that organization was, and he respected how smart, how intelligent Mr. Big was. Like, as a kid, obviously, I didn't understand all that stuff. But I'm like, wait a minute, this guy was like Secret Service and Russian trained, speaks multiple languages, and very smart, had this huge organization that people were afraid to touch. At that time, the American FBI and CIA are aware of them, but not ready want to push it into them. And then the physical description of him, that he was big and strong and balding and huge. And I'm like, I thought about this, and it might be a little derivative, but I was thinking like, wow, you know, Ian Fleming wrote Thanos back in the 1950s.
Wow.
And Marvel just completely just stole him, because he is Thanos pretty much. Because he, just like in the movies, you know, Thanos won the movie, the first Avengers movie, he won. And he lost the second movie because of lack of focus, kind of like in this book. So yeah, describing someone now as a negress just would not fly right now. Or some of the other descriptions where they just throw the word, you know, they describe someone as Negroes or Black or whatever, just kind of, but in the book, their descriptions. And honestly, if I look back and I go, in the 1950s, it was a very kind, respectful way, because, you know, a lot of Black people were addressed by a lot worse names than that. So yes, it was a product of the times. Could Ian Fleming write that book the same way today? No, but would he write that book the same way? No, but I think he would have kept all the characters the same. I never felt like this point, like offended by anything in the book. It was just a product of the times. The one time I actually got a little bit jarred, I think it's chapter 5, when the title of the thing is Nigger Heaven. I was like, what the? But then you had to read the context of the conversation that happened afterwards, and then you get, okay, he didn't call it that. It was something that someone said in the book. So yeah, you have to separate the two. But you know, as a person of color or hue, like Gloria says, I still enjoyed the book. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I enjoyed that. I felt that Ian Fleming wrote a great character, the villain, and he happened to be Black. To me, he was the best. To me, it was the best villain out of the books I read from the Ian Fleming. He's my favorite villain.
100%. 100%. And even the lines he had. By the way, I've got to tell you something, Shawn. The chat room is universally said that, and I'll quote Thomas Ryan, Shawn Parker is great. He needs his own 007 channel. So you need to get on that. Clearly, they're falling in love with you very quickly. You and Gloria and Jeremy and I can take this on the road, hopefully. We'll see if that happens.
Okay.
Jeremy, we're gonna head to an area that is near and dear because I'm going to give everybody in this chat room a sneak peek at what happens before we go live. So we have Gloria Hendry, who we've all adored since 1973 and beyond, say to us that she is she's been awarded the title of one of our bros for the day. You know, we're gonna have a bromance together. We're gonna have a party, but we got to talk about the bromance between Felix and Bond. I think this is kind of a fun aspect. I mean, I love the interplay in this book with Felix and Bond. And you know, there's emotional highs and lows. There's true affection. My gosh, you know, Felix, you know, gets appendages taken off, and Bond really feels that vengeance that goes on. What do you think about the writing of that and that whole interaction?
I think it's fantastic, and I mean, it's very poignant actually when there's just a single line where after what happens to Felix, and Bond is informed by Strangways that Felix wants to get a message to him, and Bond's reaction is, "Tell him I miss him." You know, and that's between men in 1954. Quite a thing. And I must say, when I was growing up, I never, watching the films, was never interested in Felix Leiter. I never really bought the whole thing. This is a huge sacrilege, but I didn't appeal to me. And even in Casino Royale, when I reread it recently, I really appreciated more, but I've never really understood that much. But in this book, you really do get a sense of who this guy is. It's not just, I mean, maybe in the films because they've had so many people playing him, but in this you really get a sense of who Felix Leiter is, what he looks like, what his character is, the rapport between them, the repartee between them. And you know, I love this thing where Felix Leiter somehow survives by kind of talking about jazz with the guy who's meant to be beating him up. And the relationship with Bond, it gives him a foil, it gives him a way to talk about stuff. Felix can show him around his place, so it gives us an insider's view of America. And Fleming's all about the insider view. But the big thing with Felix, of course, is that, you know, he's fed to the sharks. And I think this is a Vesper moment. This is what Fleming, it's a trademark Fleming thing, that in many of the books you do not expect this. You do not expect anything to happen. Just like in the first book, it's like, what on earth? She's a double agent. She's betrayed him the whole time. That's crazy. She's killing herself. It's out of the blue, and it's a complete reversal of everything you expect. Here, he builds up this kind of adventure story. It's fun. They're after treasure. You do not expect something as bleak as this to happen. And that whole scene where Fleming is kind of, where Bond is hoaxed to come out by this kind of Dr. Roberts at the hospital and stuff, he pulls you along so well. And you really do think, with Bond, there's not going to be a Dr. Roberts here. Like, you're a little bit before Bond, and then you're like, what is going on? What have they done? And then the whole scene where he unwraps Felix and everything, I think it's shocking and brilliantly written. It's like this is a suspenseful book.
Yes.
You know, much more suspenseful than normally people consider Bond to be. It's much more suspenseful than most of the Bond films, I would say. And he really builds up, you know, a genuine feeling between these two characters. So as you say, that vengeance feeling is there, and you want him to pay to get, you know, Mr. Big back. So I think it's an incredibly effective relationship.
I agree. I love the big moments in this bromance, as I'm calling it, that you've been talking about. I like the little ones too. I love the fact that they went to all the nightclubs in Harlem, and you know, Felix is taking them around, and the different types of drinks. And by the way, I don't know, what did they have, like 6 or 7 stops, and they were drinking the whole way. Joe Darlington and I tried that once, and I think we got to Applebee's, and then we had to pass out. But I think that bromance is there. And you know, Gloria, what I loved about your movie, Live and Let Die, is they kind of rekindled that Felix Leiter relationship where, you know, they're chatting on the phone and it's like, hey, Bond. And, you know, there's that familiar aspect. I don't know, you know, how much you consume that, obviously, when you were filming that, but, you know, it does seem like the characters were fleshed out really well in the film as well.
Yeah, well, you know, I think because we spent time together. We as a crew, as a crew and the actors, we spent time together. We would have dinner on Fridays, getting dressed in our gala. I mean, we would dress up and have dinner at the hotel, and most of us were staying at the San Souci Hotel, and the food was fabulous. And we would kibitz, around on the set, and we would, it wasn't just standing in the corner and waiting for your turn. We got a chance to interact, which helped to keep character there. So you feel comfortable when you talk to the person that you can, at least what's going through your mind creatively, you can execute because you have permission. And there's a sixth sense in acting that you tap. You tap the person. You feel the presence of who you're talking to. And if you don't feel the presence, which we do in life, you don't feel the presence, it's more difficult to have a decent conversation without twisting up your words or without wrenching inside and breaking out in cold sweat. And you try to figure out why, because you're not flowing through one another. So I think that helped with our character. We were able to, feel comfortable enough for ourselves to be more creative and go to the depths of the dialogue, because the dialogue also pushes you through to feel what you need to feel for that particular moment and the moment and what's happening.
Yeah. And it makes it so poignant too when things happen. Even, quite frankly, Rosie's death, meant more, even though, they try to, in the script and in the movie, play it as, well, she's a villainous, yes, she kind of deserved, you had this feeling, that's like, oh, Rosie, we hardly got to know you, and it's like all of a sudden she's gone.
Yeah, so when I was down there on the ground, those ants were literally on me, eating me, because they had sugar in the blood, the make-believe blood plasma that they had down there. And the ants were literally all over me. And I'm like, oh my God. And I had to stay in that state with my eyes open and my mouth darn near open. It was, and you should read Roger's book. This is his first one about his daily time, every day on the set, and he marks the days. And he said, poor, lovely Gloria is enduring ants. As he's looking at me, and I'm saying, say cut to myself.
But the good news is you were paid an incredible amount of money for this role, right?
I wish.
That was a softball.
What was that, 1973? Are you kidding me? Like Billie Jean King, she didn't get the kind of money tennis players play today. And back in the 70s, the football players didn't make the kind of money they make today. Come on. So I wish it was later.
By the way, there's a great question in the chat room, Gloria. I've got to ask you, I think it's a very good question. When you read the script for the first time, did you see Rosie as a misguided hero or an out and out villain?
A dingbat.
Oh.
A total dingbat. I said,
Choice
what have I
C.
got myself into? I said, what have I gotten myself into? I said, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this?
I love that. But you did. You made it something so indelible.
But at the same time, it was Guy Hamilton, my wonderful director, Guy Hamilton. Brilliant. We did discuss, he would whisper in my ear something. And I would go, okay. He gave me platform many times, that I could entertain and think about, because thought is feeling, and from thought, feeling into the words. And it really helps a lot.
Yeah.
So anybody who's an artist know what I'm talking about. It's your thought process, and just how you do your job. If you hate your job, that's exactly what it is.
And I love as an artist.
The product is going to be awful if you hate it.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about working at your job. If you hate your job, you're not going to do your best performance. But if you are a hateful person, and then you like Jeremy said, the character of savoring and liking something, like you could think about ice cream and you also hate that person. There's a nice little conflict there, isn't it?
Yeah. You and I have had some pretty big conversations around this. The whole fact of, sometimes happiness is a choice. Sometimes the way you go into something is a choice. And, you read on the page that they had clearly written a kind of a dingbat character, kind of ditzy. And you embedded these moments in there, even in speaking to the director, and really made it your own and made it very positive. So way to turn it
Thank
around.
you. Thank
For
you
sure.
so much for that. Thank you.
Of course. Shawn, you are a friend in the Bond community, the very inclusive Bond community. When you read this about, and I'm going to stick on the Bond-Leiter moment because I think it's so fascinating. And by the way, so well written in there. And Jeremy nailed it. It's so well written and immersive. Was that something that stood out in the book to you, or were you kind of like, there's another character?
No, that stood out to me. Like I could say two things off of that there in the book that really got to me. One was in the initial scene where Mr. Big captures them both. I mean, and I saw a little bit in the chat. Somebody's like, yeah, they stumbled through Harlem drinking with a half-assed plan to try to catch them. But like, haven't we all done that with a friend? We like, yeah, we got this important thing to do tomorrow, but first let's just hit every club, and then tomorrow we'll sort it out. And we've all done that. I mean, shoot, some of you people, if you follow some of my social media, I got a friend named Randy, and he and I have a habit of going out and partying and hitting a bunch of bars and then running a marathon the next day. It's not the best idea, but it's always a great story afterwards. But also in that same chapter, when Bond is captured and Big goes in this thing, he's like, I'm just gonna bring solitaire out because torture is ineffective and people will say anything where they're getting tortured and whatever. And then the first thing that Bond thinks of, he goes, well, I hope you're treating Felix the same way. And Mr. Big said, you just worry about yourself. He's about to get tortured, something bad, but he's thinking about his friend in the other room, hoping he's okay. Like we all want a bromance, a guy who will do that for us. It's kind of like that meme on the internet. It goes, the two of us are both locked in the police car and we can say one word to each other. What do we say? Bond and Leiter had that amongst themselves. And he wrote that back in the 50s.
That's a good point. I mean, back then, and, I think that, and Jeremy, we're going to go to you shortly because, I think Fleming gets a lot of flack, some of it coming from jealousy of other writers that maybe didn't hit his popularity. But, I think he also gets dinged today, thinking that this is just, fun little escapism pulp. But there really are some good, strong writing moments. I want to read one to kind of introduce the next section. So this is page 100. Well, you all have different books. So here we go. This is when Bond was talking to Solitaire, and we haven't talked about the Bond girl. So Bond still paused, his mind working furiously. Listen, she spoke again, but this time dully, almost hopelessly. If you don't take me, I shall kill myself. Now, will you? Or do you want to murder me? It was a really striking thing. So basically, Solitaire is telling me, take me along with you, or I'm just going to kill myself. This coming after the book with Casino Royale, where the love of his life, the person he was going to marry, committed suicide. I mean, it's a really strong, intense moment that we serve up with this Bond girl, but it's also very interesting to write, from a woman's point of view, this type of a thing. Jeremy, as a writer, but also, really a follower of Fleming's writing, those types of moments that start to paint the picture of the Bond girl, is that descriptive of Solitaire, or is that just a moment in time?
Interesting question. I mean, I think what he's doing a couple of things there. One of them is that he has a plot that doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, which, to be honest, is something that the films have also followed. So Leslie Charteris, who is the creator of The Saint, actually wrote an article at the height of the Bond phenomenon in which he said, everyone has been telling me about this guy. He's huge. He's selling millions of copies. And they said it's a bit like The Saint. So I read one, and it's a completely scathing article. And the main thing that he objected to was the plots don't make sense. And Leslie Charteris was very meticulous in making everything make sense. Ian Fleming wasn't really interested in plot. He has more of a plot here, a more interesting plot here, but he's really interested. It's a vehicle for a journey through life. Really, he wants to show us New York. He wants to show us Harlem. He wants to show us Miami, St. Petersburg. He wants to show us Jamaica. He wants to show us a good time, the food, the drink, the culture of all of these places. And along the way, we have the elements of a thriller plot. And Fleming had read thrillers since he was a boy, since he was very young. So he knew really all of the stuff that was in all these kind of thrillers. And so Solitaire, he even says something, Solitaire is mentioned as a damsel in distress, I think by Strangways. He says, oh, a real damsel in distress. So it's knowing. I mean, it's self-aware. He knows this is the cliche. He talks about, you know, she's the prize you will get at the end. He knows that's what happens. The hero saves the damsel in distress and all of those things. And what he's doing here is his plot that he's come up with is that Solitaire, he has to get Solitaire to defect from Mr. Big. And he has this by her calling Bond and saying, I want to defect. She's just literally met him. You know, just a minute ago she met him. She kind of instantly falls for this guy. And he, by all rights, should not accept this, you know, because he's literally just been betrayed by someone who he loved. So the idea that she says, I'm not a double agent, really, trust me. And he has to play with this. So he says, you know, even though it was completely against, you know, it was a terrible idea, but he just did believe it. And so that bit that you read out is Fleming trying to get over that hump. He's trying to make us believe this is genuinely a distressed woman who we need to trust her as well. But on top of that, you're right, that what you really have is, apart from the cliche of this woman, she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, all of this kind of stuff, there are several interesting things. She's genuinely telepathic. She's genuinely psychic. She genuinely seems to, there's a supernatural element to this book. As Shawn said earlier, Bond, when he reads about this stuff, doesn't dismiss it out of hand. And this is said several times. He says it to Solitaire. You can tell me this stuff. I might not believe it myself, but I understand that this has been studied and this is real. So Fleming's asking us to, he's asking his readers in 1955 to believe the supernatural exists. You know, and he's doing several things for his readers. I mean, we were talking about the race aspect. He's also saying to his readers, many of whom would have been racist, you know, there could be, it doesn't matter that the guy's black. He can still have a great big criminal underworld. So there are all of these things that he's working within his time, within the constraints of the genre that he's chosen. There are lots of things that were expected, and a lot of this is quite within that, you know, what you would expect from the genre. But there are these little tweaks, like Solitaire saying, do you want to murder me? There are these lovely kind of flair in the prose. Some of the prose is like really fantastic, especially when he starts talking about like flowers, plants, animals, all that kind of stuff, especially when we get to Jamaica. It's incredibly vivid writing, you know. And so I think I'm kind of going into all sorts of angles, but yeah, I think it's a fantastic, there's some fantastic writing here and some fantastic character work.
Yeah, it's interesting how they flesh it out. I actually thought a lot about Gloria when I was thinking about this book, because I think about the women in the film Live and Let Die, and of course Jane Seymour, who's a friend of yours, her portrayal, and you have these very strong moments with Jane Seymour where her portrayal is very snarky to Bond, even when they first meet. Very snarky, and I love it. It's almost like, you know, she really takes the Mickey, as they say, out of Roger. But then you also have, you know, Roger hornswoggling her and having all the lover cards, you know, fall out, you know, and that innocence, you know, being stripped of her. You know, as both an artist and obviously a woman in the film, you know, how do you see that portrayal of Solitaire? I mean, was that one that something you saw as something respectful, or where did that fall in your gauge? Oop. Gloria, you there?
Yes.
We lost you, Gloria.
Are you talking to me?
Oh, I was. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Oh, I'm
yes.
so sorry. You know what? Excuse me. I was so into what you were saying that if you asked me that question, well, yes. Excuse me.
No, it's fine.
Jane Seymour's role, I did not have the opportunity to be on the set with her at all. As a person and as an artist, and as her selection, I think she wanted to get away from him. Mr. Big, which is Yaphet Kotto, if I'm not mistaken, who played Mr. Big.
Yep.
In the script, she wanted to get, that's my take is period. She wanted to get away from him because she lost when she met him, and it was showed right there when she met Mr. Bond or Bond, something happened to her. She fell in love. Love came her way, which in her world takes her back to being human. And she knew she lost her powers right then. She knew because he pierced her veil like a corporation. When you pierce the veil, he pierced her veil. So her fear, and when he peeped it, when Mr. Big peeped it, he knew something had happened. So she knew her life was, going to be over because he will kill her. Because that means that she probably slept with someone to him. She probably slept with someone. So yes.
Which is a very fearful thing. I mean, he's an intimidating character in the book. He's an intimidating character
and he's jealous
in the film.
He's self-centered. He's jealous. Everything belongs to him.
Yeah.
So sharing of nothing. You are dedicated to me. That's the way he played it.
It's interesting that you bring up the selfish aspect, because in the book, one of the themes that I really started to gravitate to, this whole idea of evil, and I've done a little bit of reading about Fleming, how he really wanted this book to be a study of evil, is the whole idea that truly evil people, they have this boredom that they suffer from. And there's that quote, what is it? Mr. Bond, I suffer from boredom. I am prey to what the early Christians called asidi, the deadly lethargy that envelopes those who are sated. Yes, I read that. I didn't memorize that. But the whole point being that literally the cruelty, some of the things that he does to people, the fear is out of sheer boredom. The demises that he plans for Bonds and others could be from sheer boredom. I mean, that is maniacal, absolutely maniacal.
Yes.
And Shawn, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, as a fan, when you think about the study of the book, something very natural has to happen. I shouldn't say has to. I'm asking you if it happened. But I was all of a sudden recognizing other movie moments within the book. And I'm like, oh, this is where they took this from. And I mean, were you starting to call out all the movie relationships as it pertains to the moments in the book?
Yeah, there were a few. The one that stands out is I actually started to talk about it a little bit. It's almost like the book time traveled to troll itself, because it starts off with him tying Bond to a chair with leather straps and then not torturing him. I was like, here we go again. He's going to be tortured, or that, or you're right, the whole, here's a guy with a yacht, or multiple henchmen and all of those types of things. So yeah, I'm just like, when they ran out of books, they just said, let's go back to this book, grab this scene, and then make this a set piece in another movie. I definitely saw that reading this book.
Yeah, and I saw moments. Let's see, there was License to Kill with the warehouse and the worms.
Yeah.
The shootout. Obviously, Live and Let Die. But I found Dr. No with Quarrel and Strange Ways. For Your Eyes Only, when they get tied up and do the shark. I mean, Jeremy, you as an aficionado of this must be old hat to you. But is that typical, as writers, taking it to a screenplay? And, I love when they borrow from the book, but is that a typical situation?
I mean, that's not old hat to me. I haven't written any screenplays, but
oh, come on, what are you doing then?
No, but I think it is common. I mean, I have done it actually with my own novels, where there's scenes like I would scrap, and then later on when you're writing maybe 2 books later, you go, do I have anything in my file somewhere? And I'm sure Fleming would have done that too. And yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think this is really the template for the rest of the series, and it's the template for the films. So you have Felix Leiter, you have the briefing with M, you have Moneypenny, you have multiple henchmen. I think is a good one. There are not really multiple henchmen, that same kind of feeling in Casino Royale, but also the feeling of megalomaniac villain who's in charge of a massive kind of army, or a group. Schiffer's kind of got a few people around him, but this is really a mega villain. And this thing where he has, people working for him up and down the country, which Fleming really took from the early thriller, from writers like William LeQue, E. Phillips Oppenheim. Normally in those thrillers, it was German waiters. All of the German waiters are spies, so there's a network of secret spies. And so he's taken this to this, Harlem gangster, and he's added, Smash and all of these kind of things on top of that. But I think you have underwater scenes. You have obviously Jamaica, which features in many of the books. Obviously, Fleming knew it well, and it features in many of the films. You have Bond. You have the first time where a villain comes up with an elaborate death for the villains. Because, there's no reason why Mr. Big can't just shoot Bond and Solitaire, really, and throw them in the water and no one will find them ever again. It's pretty elaborate. The keel hauling thing is pretty elaborate. So that sets a marker for the films to we need to come up with a way that the villain is going to, that leads to all the stuff with the sharks and the barracuda and everything. This all leads to the piranhas and all of this kind of stuff. So we really have the seeds of all of that. I wrote some of this down. We have a hidden lair, a cave where Mr. Big has his stuff, and he has all his henchmen around there with all his treasure. You have an explosion.
Yes.
Not at the end of Casino Royale. You don't have anything like that. So this is an actual Bond film. This is like at the end, there's a big explosion. You could even say that the limpet mine is a kind of gadget that he blesses Q Branch for giving that to him. So he has all the scuba diving outfit. You have all the stuff with the coral and all that kind of stuff. It reads very much like the prototype of the book series, but also what we would see in the films. Almost all of the stuff you see in the films has its origins really here, I think.
Jeremy, you've struck something really interesting. Moneypenny in the chat room says Fleming wrote about the 7 deadlier sins. It was an opener for a series of articles by other writers. Yeah. Don't you feel Fleming wrote characters that embody the 7 deadly sins?
Wow, that's an amazing observation. Yeah, I think he probably did. I think sloth, you were talking about acidity. So the kind of the evil that comes from laziness, that's the sin, if you like. And I think that was something very personal to Fleming. Fleming came from a very wealthy background, and he suffered from acidity and ennui, and he basically drank himself to death early, or smoked and drank himself to death. He had what we might call now a kind of depression, if you like, and he was very interested in that phenomenon. And you see it in various stages. Bond suffers in the books from this ennui, and several of the villains have it as well. So yeah, I think if you were to go through, what I don't think you really have is anger, wrath. What I think he does with the villains is the classic thing that you do with the villain is they're hugely angry, shouting at everyone, ordering their henchmen, you got this wrong, kill Bond now, and all that stuff. Mr. Big, like Le Chiffre before him, is quiet, is calm, is controlled.
Yeah.
And often the word quiet in Fleming's work is a sign of respect, with quiet authority, with efficient, cold authority, efficient and quiet and cold. These are things Fleming admires, and you can really tell. There are words that come up in all of these books. You will notice as we go through this Fleming reading challenge that you have amazingly set up. I don't know if you noticed this, but the word spectre and spectrally appears several times in this book.
Yes.
You will see the words cruel, cold, all of these kind of things. But that's a great point I hadn't thought about the 7 deadly sins. And it probably that would be a fascinating thing to go through, for example, which characters represent which sins.
Jeremy, that's your next article. I need you to start now.
Maybe.
Shawn, did I step on you? Were you trying to say something?
Oh, no, just circling back for a minute. I thought about when I went to the theater, and like us Bond people do, we go to the midnight showing when there's only like 6 people in the theater. When Spectre opened up, and there's just a scene where the Day of the Dead, he has the mask on. I yell out, "Somebody!" And everyone turns around and looks at me. I'm like, okay, I'm the only nerd in here to get stuff. But that's what it reminded me of. That's what it reminded me, that same mask on.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's perfect, though. I love that. All right. So, Jeremy, I'm going to go to you for this one. How was this received? received? I mean, you've got the critics. I know that they had printing. I think there were 9,000 in the first year, which is very good. Did okay in the United States, but how was this received overall, this book?
Yeah, so I have written about this. I've written an article called Enemy Action, which you can read for free on my website. It's also available if you want as a paperback or a Kindle. It's a short article. But yeah, I go through really the reception that Fleming had at the time. And Casino Royale was very well received critically. Got very good reviews from the Times Literary Supplement and very prestigious magazines and newspapers in Britain. And then really it started to go wrong in a critical field with this book. And the real problem was that the reviewers of these magazines were not thriller readers. So they were coming at it from a completely different angle. So I go through this in the article, but one of the first reviews that really kind of didn't like this book, it reviewed this with a completely different kind of literary novel by an African writer. And it showed total disdain for the whole concept. It called this a detective story. And where can we lay the blame for the detective story? Is it on Edgar Allan Poe? It was someone reviewing a book who hates thrillers in the first place. It was a professor of medieval English literature. So really, this isn't the ideal thing. But that was the kind of starting gun for a whole lot of attacks, because everyone each attack went back to the last one. So that was the first one that kind of objected to Live and Let Die. That reviewer, I think his name was Edmund Cork, he really objected to what happens to Felix. And he thought that this isn't the sort of thing that we shouldn't feel pity for a character in a thriller. But to stress again, this guy was a professor of medieval English and had no idea what happens in thrillers whatsoever. And as we've discussed, I think that's actually one of the most effective things about this book, which is it actually lifts it into something that is a little bit more interesting, because you do not expect, you think that they're superhuman. They're these buddies, and they'll save the day. And then suddenly it's like, wow, this is actually, he could die. And this is like a life-threatening thing. He's had a leg and an arm amputated, but that was his objection. But the main objection was really about the fact that Casino Royale had been well received. And it was sort of envy, basically, if we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins. And then the next attack took points really directly from that attack, like directly the same points, repeated them and just kind of made them like even more so. And then each one kind of did that until you got to, and with each book, Fleming started selling more copies. And so by the time he was like 4 or 5 in, then you really had, actually with Dr. No, a huge backlash where you had a very, very well-known article, Sex, Sadism and Snobbery, I think I got that the right way around, which has really lasted until now, which is really a lot of the perception of Fleming's work now, dates back to these attacks from the 50s by people who, just again stress, knew nothing about thrillers and hadn't read any contemporary thrillers, or very few. So that's really what had happened. And that's just a phenomenon, unfortunately, that, when people get bigger, people can kind of want to put you down. And so the bigger it got, we can't accept this as literature. And then also, I think the misapprehension that because they're fun, that we can't take them seriously. Whereas in fact, we don't have that misapprehension about Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin or great comedy. You don't think, Seinfeld is rubbish because, we can't take Seinfeld seriously as a sitcom because it's a sitcom. We understand now that actually things that are funny or things that are fun, things that are light, also take skill and talent and artistry. But with literature, it hasn't really happened that way. So because they're kind of light and they're adventure stories, people have sort of dismissed them. Yeah. That's a long answer, but that's basically the situation.
But honestly, that's what people want to embrace is, what was the outcome? What's the reaction? And, I will tell people you should all read Jeremy's article. We're going to put it in the links. It's fascinating. We talked about it in other videos, but it really does get into this. And Gloria, I want to, I'm going to do something, Gloria, and it's so geeky. And I'm going to just call it out that it's very geeky.
You, David?
Yeah, I know, but I'm going to do something because there's been so many questions for you that I think really pertain to what we're talking about today overall. But you do know what the Queen of Cups means. It's an upside down position. It's a deceitful, perverse woman, a liar and a cheat, which you are the opposite of. But I'd like some answers now. So, all right, I had to open it up with that. But we've got some great questions for you. By the way, I was up all night saying, do I do this and embarrass myself in front of a Bond girl? Yes, I do. This is what I do. I embarrass myself for you all. But Sean O'Hare's got a great question I have to ask. Sean asks, and it's a big question, but I think you're so good at answering these. How do you feel about the franchise overall? And do you think it would continue for so long? And how do you feel about taking part in something as big as this all these years later?
That's a good question, because one thing for sure, we cannot predict the future. I did the eighth Bond, right? Now, who would have thought? We're at the 25th or whatever, going into the 26th, I think. I don't even think the Bond family knew that this was going to happen. First of all, they were children and they were kids when the eighth one. And as it went on, they embraced it. And if you look at the years between each Bond film being made, sometimes it was 3 years, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 7. It all depends. There were lawsuits. They almost got wiped out. I mean, it's incredible. Who would have thought? It's the public. It's the fans. The fans are the ones that have kept Bond series alive, and none other. Because if they don't go, there wouldn't be a Bond franchise. That's basically simple, because each year I know, well, you know, as a business person,
Yeah.
and I'm not a great business person, but I know if something's not popular anymore and it's barely eking in any kind of funds, what are you going to do about it? You're going to have to move on. No, it's the fans. We never know. It's still out there, but it's still today the longest running series ever. And it has the audacity to change the star, the Bond, has the audacity to change that. And now we're into no longer Ian Fleming wrote the script or wrote the novels. Now we're into new novelists writing and trying their best to keep the trend. Now that's hard. Because
That's very hard.
because Ian Fleming, wasn't he also a spy? So his
He was,
stories
yeah.
are based upon truth. Nothing like being based upon truth.
Hmm.
You seem to adore the fans, which, I don't want to dismiss, because when it comes to artists and it comes to actors, that's not always the case. In many cases, it's not the case. What is it about the fans that you've met over the years, and this is an actual question, that you adore so much?
It seems as though there are adjectives. The adjective is a good life, positive, um, a style, an attitude, your way of looking at life from the high side. High side meaning the best of yourself, always moving forward with the best of yourself, expecting the best of yourself, the best way you dress, the best way you eat, the best way you work, the best way you communicate, the best way you whatever. And that's what I see when they come, especially when they come before me, or when I see them, they love Bond. And when they speak about it, it's always with enthusiasm. It's always with energy of love, passion, greatness. And even today, the Bond film, the Bond stories, they had the audacity to open up a spy museum in Washington.
Yes.
And it's successful. And
Very.
because of the gadgets that they came up with, now they're real. We are doing those gadgets. That's something that I remember too as a child, looking at the cartoons. And the cartoons, now we're looking at reality. We have electric cars. We have cars that fly. We have cars that can go into the water. I mean, come on. So that's what Bond embodies.
I love it. You're an incredible ambassador, truly, for the franchise. I mean, it's enough that you have this indelible character that forever will live within our homes and in our hearts. But for you to be able to be so eloquent and positive, and not just positive about Bond, but one of the things we've always said in the Bond community is it's a community of people that gravitate to positivity in their lives. And you really are that individual that spearheads that. So my gosh, just thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me here. I mean, I'm enjoying the heck out of myself. I'm learning a lot more too.
I am too. This is why I do this, so I can learn something. Otherwise, I just go fallow. But Shawn, as the other fan in the room besides myself, you know, we're starting to close out our event. Weep, weep. It's going to make everybody very upset. But you know, I'd like you to kind of, from the book standpoint, you know, you've experienced this book. Give me kind of the overarching thing. You know, what are those aspects that you loved about the book, even about the franchise? This is your opportunity to give this big, bold summation.
I guess in rereading the book now as an adult, the thing I liked about the book is that the characters were all well written, especially I've already talked about the villain. Like, just Mr. Big's just a well-written villain. And now that I live in Miami, where we have a large Haitian community, some of the details that he talks about that Ian Fleming had to have met someone like that who knew those. Those are all real details, the ones that are about him being part Haitian. As a person, you know, and in the book, he interjects every once in a while real French phrases. I mean, despite the fact that I live in Miami, I never took Spanish in school. I took French because I thought it would make me cool and be romantic with girls, but that didn't work. But it worked for reading the book. But I like that this book was written in the 50s, still relatable now. And then we talked about the moments where the movies that we've enjoyed since then have definitely pulled parts from that book. And then going on to a little bit to you're talking about, the Bond community. People like, I never read any of the James Bond book and not this one. And the fact that lots of people love this book, no one's reading this book going, yeah, I like that book, but it would be better if the villain weren't black or this, that, or whatever. Literally, you could take Mr. Big, you know, he's gray in the book. Make him purple, he's Thanos. He's just a great villain.
Exactly.
And you know, and the community spawns from the books and then also to the movies. Gloria, I'm gonna embarrass myself a little bit by telling you this, but Live and Let Die was the first James Bond movie I ever saw. So, and I saw it, I'm gonna date myself, because the movie came out, I was 73, I was 6 years old. But a long time ago, ABC used to have ABC Sunday Night at the Movies, where they would rerun a movie that had been in a movie theater. So 3 years after that, when I was 9, it used to come on at 9 o'clock. I used to have a 9 o'clock bedtime. I had to go to bed at 9. So only time I could stay up past 9 was to watch the Philadelphia Phillies. So my dad was watching Live and Let Die in the living room, and I was going to bed. I looked over, and I just looked in there, and I said, what is this? Because the scene I had seen was Jeffrey Holder, and I'm like, that's the 7-Up guy, because he was in the 7-Up commercials, if you're old enough to remember it. And then my dad said, sit here and watch this movie with me. And my mom came in and said, it's past his bedtime and he can't watch this. And it was the one time my dad said, no, he's going to watch this movie. And it was the one of the traditions I had with my dad was I was always allowed to watch James Bond movie. And my dad had like the precursor of the VHS recorder back then. So he recorded the movie. When we watched it again, and he sat there and he goes, wait, and waited for the scene where you came out, and my dad was like, you'll appreciate this more in about 10 years. I'll never forget that moment. I can't believe I'm on a podcast.
And now you know it was a man's hand, Shawn. It was a man's hand.
Yeah, now it's a man's hand. So,
oh gosh.
Childhood wish fulfilled, childhood wish destroyed by hand. So,
Oh my gosh.
It's awesome. Yeah, the community is great. Like David and I have been friends for 10 years. I've met some of the other people from the other Bond things. Sandy Shepard, I've actually met her in person. She hosted me when I went to San Francisco. She also wrote a great book too. I mean, I know I like James Bond. And at one point before, we had this technology where we all could communicate like this, especially before Joe Darlington came out with his website. To me, I was like this weird guy who liked these James Bond books and these movies, who would try to find these things that I saw in the movie or in a book and have these little pieces in my apartment. And I was like a weird guy doing it by myself. And then the Being James Bond website came out. Then the podcast came out. Then I ran into David Zaritsky, whose collection is like insane. It probably should be a museum on its own. So I didn't feel as weird doing these things. My friends were like, "Oh, this is crazy. What do you got to do?" I was like, but when you meet other people who find something to be positive about, I mean, we're no weirder than the Harry Potter people, or we're way cooler than them, to be honest.
How boring would it be to be somebody's definition of normal? To me, that is the most boring thing in the world.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like before I knew there was going to be a Being James Bond podcast, like the year before, I was like, oh, I'm getting old. I just had a big health thing. I don't want to go into that, but I wanted to get in shape. I saw Casino Royale. I got in shape, and in my mind, it's like, I'm going to go buy that swimsuit and look great on my birthday on that. And thinking I would be the only person in the world who would do something like that. And then 2 or 3 years later, there's like hundreds of people like me. And that's what's great about the community.
Yeah.
So
good. I love it, Shawn.
And David, thanks for this. I'm glad to have this chance. I can't believe I'm talking to Gloria. I mean,
it's very heady. I know.
Yeah.
We've got to like fan ourselves. Oh no, we just lost her.
I think she's there, but we can't see her. Are you there,
Okay.
Gloria?
I'm trying to get back to you all. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can hear you.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yes.
I'll ask to start your video. Let's see if that works.
Right.
Do you see that?
Okay, let me just started my video.
We got this far.
Yes, we have it. My phone got hot for some reason.
Oh, my goodness. It's not used to working this hard.
Oh, yes, right? For
Well,
reason.
while you're doing that, Jeremy, one of the things, again,
can I go out and come back in?
Of course you can. Yes,
Thank
you can do
you.
anything you like.
For how long
We'll see you soon.
Yes.
Jeremy, first of all, I really do ask everybody who's watching this to really go visit. You've got a great website. It's very experiential. I've gone through it. Again, I keep calling you an accomplished author because you are, and you've written some really great articles. Reading this book again, just the overall experience, and anything that you would like to talk about project-wise, or what do you think we in the Bond community could really gravitate where you're concerned? You've got the floor.
Okay. I mean, I thought that was very interesting what Shawn was saying about, lots of thought. There's so much to take in. And I think, for example, the comment that you took from the YouTube chat about 7 Deadly Sins, there's a lot that hasn't actually been explored with James Bond. People think that everything, there have been so many coffee table books and lots of books and DVDs and documentaries and all stuff, but there's always more. So even when Shawn was just talking there about, of course, there was a boom after Casino Royale came out, and Daniel Craig, this whole thing that would he be able to be Bond? Lots of people didn't like that idea. And then when he comes out of the ocean in the Bahamas, and it's like, whoa, that guy's worked out. And that has actually created a kind of change actually in men and what they do in whole. But what's so fascinating to me is while he was saying that, I thought, that's in this book. Bond swims a mile, and then he can swim 2 miles easily. And he has a whole training regimen with Quarrel, where he's preparing to do this kind of special forces from the war. I mean, he's using a limpet mine from the war. He's going to do this swim and put this bomb on this yacht. And he's training to do that. How his nutrition, he's doing all of this kind of stuff. He has a regime. Quarrel actually puts him on a regime. This is what we're going to do. And so the seeds of all of this kind of stuff. I think it's really fascinating that it's lasted this long. This book was written in 1954, 1955, and what Shawn was saying also about how, when we talked about this, like Mr. Big, it could be black, it could be purple and all this kind of stuff. That's what Fleming was trying to do with this book. All the way back in 1954, he was trying to say, why are all the villains in every single book white? Isn't it time? Maybe we thought there are other races, or they're Chinese, there's Fu Manchu. Maybe there's going to be a black villain. And then he had to kind of explain it. He has, M explains it. They've had everything else. The black race is, doing lots of things. So maybe there's going to be a great black criminal. Mr. Big himself says the same thing. So I think that what I was thinking when Shawn was talking is actually Ian Fleming would probably be absolutely thrilled, absolutely thrilled at the reaction, because this book has been overshadowed by that whole, the racial aspect of it.
Yes.
And for many years, this has been a book where it's like an untouchable book, regardless of all the stuff I said about the critical reaction. That was back in the 50s. They didn't care at all about that. No one discussed that originally in the 50s and 60s. But gradually that became the defining thing, the chapter title that we talked about earlier that Shawn was so eloquent about. That became the thing that people knew about this book. So a lot of Bond fans know that. Like you, a little bit hesitant. You come to Bond when you're young. Shawn was 9. People come to Bond when they're young, generally, the Bond films. And then the books are difficult because you've got this whole thing. You've got Sean Connery, you've got Roger Moore and stuff. So it's harder, to do that. But I think that's what's so interesting about this, that when you push through and find this, you actually find, if you do read them, if you read this book and you just forget all that stuff you've heard about the chapter title, forget the fact that it's not exactly the same as the film, and you just read this book as an adventure story, and you will see that A, there's a lot of the stuff that you love about James Bond in this. B, it's a brilliantly written adventure story. It's got a lot of stuff in it, and it is an exciting, suspenseful. There's some real suspense in here, and some really brilliant kind of twists and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, I really, really enjoyed reading it again. I'm delighted that you started this challenge, because I think it is a really great thing to do. And it's given me lots of different ideas to go away. Maybe I'll write something about the 7 Deadly Sins. I have written, check out my article, Enemy Action, if you like. I've written a book called Duns on Bond, which goes through various things I've written about Bond. So you might be interested in that. But I think I would encourage everyone to read Fleming, and maybe let's go and find more stuff that we can, write about, discuss, have conversations like this about, because there's lots to do.
Absolutely. By the way, there have been so many individuals, and it's people in their 30s and 20s for the most part, which is so fantastic for me to see that, not just, this old codger here, who have so appreciated picking this up, because they said, I needed an excuse. And I wanted to watch this with some sort of knowledge of what the book had to say, so I could really interact. And so I have read the book, and some of the takeaways have been so positive. And you hit it on the nail, though. When I was getting prepared to do this, I did have certain individuals come to me and go, "Oh, that Fleming book. Mm-hmm. Whoa, that's a real hot topic." And I'm like, "Is it? Well, let's talk about it," which is why I didn't want to shy away from it. 1 hour into our discussion, I wanted to be like, well, let's talk about it. Let's get a point of view, and let's get a series of point of views. And I loved it. I loved the discussion. And it was, Shawn, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no preheating of that discussion at all?
No, we never pre-talked about any of it.
No, all pretty authentic. I feel terrible now because, we were going to get a Gloria next.
Yeah.
And she hasn't been able to come back on, which is so unfortunate. I'm so grateful that she was here for 95% of it, for sure. I wonder if her agent called and tied up the line and said, "This isn't doing anything for your career."
Diana Ross called.
Diana Ross called. Yes, that's what's happened. That's a big thing.
But maybe we should see if anyone has some questions or anything, and then we can see if we can. Maybe she comes back while we
will absolutely buy her some time. There's a couple people that have asked questions. Of course, this may not surprise you, Jeremy, but most of them were for Gloria.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. I hadn't thought about that. But yes.
Any questions for our panelists while we buy Gloria a couple of minutes? And we could just come back on. And by the way, one thing I will, as people are gravitating to, hey, Sid's Gaming, hello to you too. I'm saying hello to people. That's really innovative, but I am. There's a couple great things coming up. A lot of you know that October 5th is Global James Bond Day. And I don't know, I truly don't, I'm not being coy, if there's anything planned from the official James Bond powers that be. I don't know, but there are some things cooking with fans and the Bond community. James Bond Complex and 007 Intrepid, they're doing something specifically with Casino Royale in having a lot of people all over the world talking about the different chapters. That's going to be launched on Global James Bond Day. We already have out Warren Ringham from Cue the Music Show. He has launched something called the Lockdown Concerts, which because we're locked down, I don't know if you noticed, many of us are. They're concerts that you can literally buy a ticket to, just like you were going to a concert, sit in the comfort of your home, pour libation if you want to, and just simply gravitate to this incredible music. Shamir asks, did the stairwell fight in the novel remind you of the stairwell fight in Casino Royale? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good point. Shawn, did that kind of harken back to you?
Thing, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, gritty stairwell fight. When you read it, it hurt as much as watching it in the film, because every time they fell, I was like, God, that hurt, man. You know that hurt.
Oh, you felt it. You felt the impact. And Fleming, even writing it, does a good job with that.
Yeah.
Andrea Nos 17 asked Jeremy a question. Jeremy, what would you say the closest spy book to James Bond is?
Closest spy book to James Bond. Wow, that's quite a question. I mean, I don't think I think it's hard to imitate Fleming, but certainly in the 60s, there was an author called James Mayo. And that was actually a pseudonym for a friend of Fleming and a colleague of his at the Sunday Times, a guy called Stephen Coulter. And he wrote a series about a British, he's kind of an agent for a private intelligence agency called Charles Hood. And their cover is kind of arts and antiques and all that kind of stuff. One of the books is called Shame Lady. Another one is called Hammerhead. And these are sort of, what you might call Bond, rip-offs or these kind of stuff. But actually, they're very good. They're really, if you read all the Fleming, do that first. Then if you read all the continuation novels, do that next. Then I would say maybe you try James Mayo. One of my favorite spy series is a series called Quiller by a British author called Adam Hall. And that's a British secret agent who is codenamed 9Q because the nine means that he is resistant to torture.
Wow.
He does not have the lifestyle stuff. So he's not interested in clothes. Sorry, David. He doesn't have a Tom Ford suit.
I'll get over it.
Yeah. But they are brilliant, kinetic, fantastic. If you like the Bourne films, that kind of suspense kind of stuff, I would really recommend the Quiller series by Adam Hall. But they're a little bit different, but he's a contemporary of Fleming. But I mean,
Shawn?
I could talk about that for hours. To be honest, there are lots and lots.
I love that. Shawn. We have a question from Thomas Ryan. How would you feel if Sheriff Pepper was in the book? How's that for a question?
I don't think you could look. The actor who portrayed that, he did such a good job. I don't think it wouldn't even translate for the book. I'm glad it wasn't in the book. We didn't need that in the book. But I think in the movies at the time it came out, we needed that in there. I mean, look, he was good enough. He came back again for the next movie again. So, but in the book we didn't need him. But for the movie, yeah, he was good for that.
He was needed. All right, this is a good one. So, Jeremy, this one's yours.
Okay.
Hadja Famor actually asks, which villain, personality-wise, do you feel comes closest to the novel's Mr. Big in the movies? Ooh.
Okay, that's an interesting question.
It is.
I don't know. I mean, I think, obviously they changed the whole stuff by having the diplomat kind of character angle in the film. But I think you can sense that the Mr. Big from Live and Let Die, the film, is pretty closely related. I would say when I've reread Fleming recently, I've noticed that a lot of the villains are quite similar in some ways. They're normally physically very different, but they often have quite similar personality traits. This thing that they are very arrogant, They're very clever. They are extremely efficient. They're quiet often, but they have sort of huge brains, and Bond respects that. The acidy thing is quite in quite a few of the villains, actually. So Blofeld, if you look at some of the speeches that Blofeld gives in Fleming, and some of the speeches that Dr. No gives, they're actually you could swap them and they could be the same person speaking. So in a way, he had a kind of, he created this kind of mega villain thing, this kind of character with all of these henchmen and all these trappings. And hello, we have Gloria Hendry.
You look at that. All we got to do in the Bond community is to chat and answer crazy questions.
I can stop talking. I can stop talking now because everyone wants to ask you questions.
Jeremy's exhausted. Gloria, yes. I'm so glad you got back on.
Yes, but I had to get ice on it.
You had to cool your phone down.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, we don't want to overheat it, but we did want to give you an opportunity. You have a wonderful book. Oh dear.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Hello. Oh wow.
It was so close.
That was close.
Feel it.
Yeah.
I could feel it.
It's Diana Ross, I'm telling you.
it is. She's back for revenge. But one of the things that I did want to talk about with Gloria, I know she wanted to, is up on Amazon right now. She has a book called Gloria, and I don't know if a lot of people know about it. It is a limited edition book. There is availability, and it talks about her different stories, her different journeys that she has. She has some great James Bond stories about Roger Moore, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, etc. And we may have her back, but I will let her know. We'll give her audio a chance. I have a feeling her phone is overheating.
Just overheating. Yeah.
It's like a Bond film.
Yeah.
Gloria.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
Okay, I just talked to the whole chat room about your wonderful book, but can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. Here we are. There
Nice.
it is. It's Gloria, Bond and All. This is the back. It's on Amazon. And it's an autobiography and memoirs of independent filmmaking along with Bond. And here's the Bond flyer in the center.
Oh.
And Roger and I, it's all over. And it's on Amazon. And it's about my filmography and about my life at the same time. And I don't know if anybody remembers this.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
That's on a German magazine with Roger. It's a caricature. Oh my God, I don't want to show that. Well, There's a Geoffrey Holder on one end.
Oh my gosh.
There's me. Yes. Can you see that?
Yes, that's a unique pose. I like that. I haven't seen that photo.
Right. These are just a sample of, it's a pictorial book. And again, it's, I don't want you to see that one. Well, no, I don't want you to see, not on Zoom.
Now I want to buy the book. That was genius of you. Yeah. All right. If you want to see the book, if you want to see the picture that Gloria didn't want to share, you got to buy the book.
Well, yeah, and that's the one with us. We'll be blowing garlic in his face.
He doesn't look like he minds. Putting myself out there a little bit. Gloria, you have been an absolute delight. Oh, I love that. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
It
goes on and on.
We're gonna leave a link for people to connect to your book, because let's face it, we could probably have you on this call for 4 more hours hearing your stories. But would you come back and visit us on one of these events?
Absolutely, David. I'll be there. Jeremy, I'll be there. Shawn, I'd be there. Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well,
That's
that
good to
just
hear.
made Shawn's day.
Yeah. Made my day too.
Exactly.
I really enjoyed this. I really did. I'm having such a blast, and I'm also learning a lot too. And just Jeremy, Ian Fleming was a spy, am I correct?
Yeah, during the Second World War, he was involved in British intelligence. So yeah, he knew quite a lot about it.
And remember that briefcase?
Yeah, that was real. Yeah.
I have the understanding that it was was Eon that created this scenario with the Germans and with the Spaniards, and he plotted, and they in other words, they found a man that
Yeah.
demise. He was. Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah, yeah, you're talking about a Second World War operation called Operation Mincemeat, which was a deception operation. Yeah, that
Yes,
he was
exactly.
yeah he was
Eon
involved
Fleming.
in coming up with this. He suggested this idea quite early on, and then it was kind of developed by other people. But yeah, he and his brother, in fact, were both involved in espionage and deception, particularly deception operations during the Second World War. So a lot of the stuff that goes in to Live and Let Die. And some of the other books. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier that you were into martial arts before we came on air. I mean, James Bond, I don't know if you know this, but in some of Ian Fleming's books, he's trying to write a martial arts manual
Wow.
called I think it's called Keep Alive or Stay Alive or something like that. But a lot of this was based on the stuff that Fleming knew from intelligence work during the Second World War.
And Eon Fleming had a lot to do with winning this war with his
Yeah, yeah,
yes, with,
he had a pretty key position during the war. Yeah,
wow, yeah. If it hadn't for him, I don't know, you know.
yeah,
I mean,
we
there's
have a
a
lot to
lot
be
to be
thankful for him.
said.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said. And poor Hollywood at that time did not take him seriously, and they rejected him. And I tell you, that was very painful for him, right?
Mm. Yeah, he had a few years where he was really trying to get Bond off the ground, and it was all a bit of a mess. And unfortunately, he kind of died. He died just around the making of Goldfinger, and so he didn't really see, because
Exactly.
Goldfinger was really where it became a huge phenomenon globally. So he saw some success. He saw huge success with the books, but with the films, he didn't really get to see what we now can see.
Exactly.
I mean, I think he would have. I think he would have loved and been fascinated by the film that you were in.
Yes, and not only that, Eon Fleming did not want Sean Connery as the Bond because he was just too good looking. And the name of Bond was taken from his friend because they were bird watchers. Am I correct?
Yeah, he had a book. He had a place in Jamaica, and he had a book called The Birds of West Indies, which was written by, I don't think it was a friend. They became friends maybe a little bit later on, but he had this kind of Bible to birds. And you see this actually in this book, because you see a lot of the flora and the fauna he really describes beautifully and very vividly. And so that was his kind of Bible. So he took the name from that. And then
Yeah.
I can't remember what your other point was, but yes.
Yeah. I thought it was his friend that bird watched with him. His name was James Bond, and he told him, "I would like to use your name for my character." Am I right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think he asked him, but yeah, he told him later that he had used it. Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
Great. I'll tell you, yeah. So the Bond, just the Spy Museum, I mean, I think it's really awesome to take on all of this. And now it is real. A lot of the agents are carrying these particular concealed, gadgets. And it's just awesome
Yeah,
how much of a contribution the Bond series has made.
absolutely. And it's
I
interesting
mean,
because when you think about technology, the Bond series really did kick things off. Beepers, for example, that you saw in From Russia with Love. But the Spy Museum, Spyscape, Elements, even Bond in Motion, a lot of these things that allow us to kind of immerse ourselves really do see that at the heart of these, they really are and should be about spycraft. They should be about intrigue and those tenets, as opposed to Transformer movies that are about giant Michael Bay explosions. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
no,
first of all, I do want to thank all of our panelists, Shawn, Jeremy, and Gloria, for spending their time this afternoon, this evening, whenever you dialed in. This was a delight. We had so many people pop in and out, and I really hope you had a great pleasure. And here's the great news. Here's the great news about this. Even though this live stream is ending, you know what happens. James Bond will return in Moonraker, and we will be doing our book club in Moonraker next. You'll have to see who's on the panel then. But everybody, thank you for joining us. This has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience, and we will see you all real soon. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Thank you
David.
so much.